Now, it's been revealed the bus network in Scotland has been cut by around 12.5% over the last 5 years. That's according to data from the Department for Transport, which has been analysed by the BBC. Our reporter Oliver Wright has been speaking to people in Glasgow.
Along at Govan, there used to be a bus that took you to Asda. That's no longer there. So for people like myself, for me to go to Asda, which is that direction, I'd need to get a bus and then walk for 10 minutes, but I can't walk for 10 minutes because of arthritis, or I'd have to get a taxi. So it's cheaper for me to get stuff delivered.
It's an hourly bus service, and by the time the train pulls into the station, the bus is away, so you've got to wait an hour for the next service to come.
So not only is it every hour, it just doesn't link up with the train?
It doesn't link up at all.
Sometimes they don't turn up, maybe due to a lack of drivers or whatever, we don't know, but it's mostly going home that's the problem. They just don't turn up.
So it's scheduled to be on,
Yeah.
it's on the timetable, it's there, and it just doesn't arrive?
Yeah, exactly.
And that must be quite an issue then, if you've got somewhere to be.
Well, you're just going home, so it's not a huge problem, but it's just a bit annoying that you've got to stand for an extra half hour in the cold.
Well, listening to that is Ellie Harrison, a transport activist with Get Glasgow Moving. Ellie, does that 12.5% figure tally with your experience of what's happened?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've seen millions, literally millions of miles of routes cut across Scotland over the last 20, 30 years. And you can just hear from those passengers on the streets of Glasgow the impact that's having on millions of people's lives as well. And what it shows us is the way that we're running bus services in Scotland at the moment in a completely deregulated and privatised system is fundamentally broken, and we need some radical changes to turn around the situation. Otherwise, it's just going to keep getting worse.
Which areas are worst affected? Is it in the cities or is it rural services?
I mean, it's rural services are even worse. You know, you heard from passengers on the streets of Glasgow there and how they're suffering with the changes that First Bus has brought in to 25 services across the city earlier in the month. But in rural services, you know, there'll be communities that had their vital routes cut years ago, and they've just had to find alternatives, and that's probably been buying a car, whether they can afford it or not, because that's the only way that they can get around. And of course, that's a disaster for the climate. So what we really need to do is to re-regulate these private bus companies. I mean, the Scottish Government gives them more than £320 million in public subsidies every year. And they have no say over the routes and services that they run for that money at the moment in the present system.
So do we need kind of minimum service levels then?
Well, what we need is public bodies like the regional transport partnerships that we have. We have SPT in the Glasgow region, to use the powers in the Transport Act to re-regulate the bus services so that the public body plans the routes and the timetables so that they can connect seamlessly with the subway and the trains, because we heard passengers saying that that's a massive issue, that the timetables don't link up.
Yeah.
And that the public transport can be run in the public interest. So
Okay.
if we are going to give public money to private bus companies, then we can at least make sure that they deliver the services that we need in return.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed.